What's going on, guys? Thanks for tuning in today. I'm thrilled to be joined by Kyle Madson. Kyle, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's getting hot though, which is not ideal, but we're working our way through it. I'm running my AC for the first time, so
it is hot today. I got in my car leaving work, and it's at like 80 something, high 80s for the first time. I'm like, ooh, it's tough.
I've got to go to Sacramento tomorrow. I live out in the East Bay. I got to go to Sacramento tomorrow, and the high is like 93. I'm not ready. I'm not ready at all.
No, good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Kyle, you guys may know him from the Niners Wire, 95.7 The Game, Candlestick Chronicles, and Blue Wire. That's Blue Wire's, in my opinion, one of their best podcasts. And Twitter pun aficionado. I'm sure everybody knows you as that because you are fantastic with the puns on Twitter. So I'm sure the name rings a bell. Kyle, as we're recording this, the draft just happened this past weekend. What are your overall thoughts on it? I'm sure you've been asked, a million times, but how are you feeling? How do you like Trey Lance?
All right, so we'll start with Trey Lance because ultimately, like nothing else in this draft matters if Trey Lance isn't good. So Eric Branch at the San Francisco Chronicle wrote it as Trey Lance and 7 other guys, and that's ultimately how it's going to kind of be remembered. If they made 8 picks, if 7 of them stink and Trey Lance is awesome, nobody's going to remember that they whiffed on the other 7. But it was really clear to me that their plan is to run the football. And I think you saw that with 2 running backs. The first time the team's drafted 2 running backs in a draft since 1991. Aaron Banks is he's really good in pass pro. So you're going to protect your rookie quarterback with him. But I think he's going to transition fine as a run blocker. I know there's a question about that at first, just because of his size. He's not super mobile, but I think they're going to be fine with him. And then you add in 2 rookies who are now under team control for the next 4 years with Trey Sermon and Eli Mitchell. And it becomes pretty clear what their plan is with Trey Lance. I think it's going to be something like we saw in Washington with Robert Griffin III, with maybe some more I'm going to, for lack of a better term, normal offensive stuff mixed in, because I think Lance is going to be a better thrower than RG3 was.
Yeah, most definitely. Did you happen to see, by the way, RG3's kind of doing some work trying to get back in with the Shanahans? Interesting. We'll see if that happens.
I feel like it would have happened already if it was going to. But
probably.
I mean, maybe not. Yeah. We'll see.
Is there one pick in particular that you think is kind of flying under the radar that the fan base hasn't really noticed, that you're maybe a little more excited about than others aren't?
I think Ambry Thomas can play. The defensive back they took 102 overall. So if you don't know his story, in 2019 with Michigan, right before the season, he developed colitis and lost like 30 pounds and came all the way back from that. It was during the offseason, so he battled all the way back, earned a starting spot, and then had his best year of college ball, and then opted out of 2020 just because of the health concerns there. So I think he's a really good player. I think if he had played in 2020 and built on his 2019, he would have gone a lot higher than late in the 3rd round. So I don't know if we'll even see him this year. Granted, I was just kind of going through. I'm working on a 53-man roster projection right now, and the cornerback spot is really, really thin. It's not great. It's Jason Verrett, it's Emmanuel Mosley, it's K'Wan Williams, and then like Ambry Thomas is like their 4th corner at this point, which isn't, I think, ideal. Diamador Lenore, I think, is fine, but I think they're grooming him to be the long-term nickel with Williams on a 1-year deal. So he's the guy that I'm definitely most excited to watch. And then Talanoa Hufanga from USC, the safety. I don't know if he'll ever start on defense, but I think he's just going to carve out a decade of being awesome on special teams, and those guys are fun. So.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. He was I think the one who said like his goal is to be a special teams Pro Bowler. So yeah, hopefully he can make it happen, man. And as far as Ambry Thomas, that would be great. The 49ers definitely need some young energy at the cornerback position that hopefully can, be sustained for a bit. Now, as the week of the draft came, Kyle, it was kind of up in the air for so long. We were hearing it's Mac Jones. And then I think Peter King was the first to say the 49ers have narrowed it down to Mac Jones and Trey Lance. And I think I even saw you tweet this out, King, Trotter, Breer, all these, big reporters have narrowed it down to these two. Why do you think Justin Fields, who was basically the fans' consensus pick, in my opinion, wasn't in these reports or wasn't regarded for the 49ers as one of the top, I guess, two in contention?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if maybe he was there and they just liked some things that Jones and Lance did better. I know that on ESPN, Dan Orlovsky and somebody else, I forget who it was, did a whole breakdown of his throwing motion, though, and how it was a little more elongated and it made it harder for him to operate within the pocket. And we know how important that is to Shanahan. So I'm wondering if, because he works with John Beck, who Kyle Shanahan's very close with, the quarterback's coach at 3DQB, I'm wondering if they very early on just kind of ruled out Fields because of those I'm going to say issues, those nitpicks. There is probably a better term with this, throwing mechanics. And I think that's just something that they didn't think they would have to work through with Jones and with Lance. And I think that's why it was those two guys above Fields. And maybe Fields' name was there, like I said, and it eventually got narrowed down by a very small margin to Jones and Lance. And if that was the case, I'm guessing that small margin was that ability to operate not just under pressure, but when a pocket's collapsing, can you get rid of the football? Can you find a receiver and get rid of the football in a tight window? And I'm not sure that Fields could do that. So that's what I'm guessing, but I'm fascinated to find out because I think he's a really, really good player.
Yeah, same here. I mean, Fields for me, it was kind of 1A, 1B with Lance. I think everybody was like, just don't be Mac Jones, please. If these reports are true, it seems like it was a lot closer to actually being Mac Jones than we all kind of are comfortable with, which kind of leads to my next question. Nobody really knew, and it was funny seeing these big reporters who were all so used to knowing, the Ian Rappaport's, Adam Schefter, basically say, based my belief, it's going to be Mac Jones. I think Adam Schefter said at one point it's like 98% Mac Jones or something like that. Did the 49ers just deploy the thickest and most successful smokescreen in NFL draft history?
I don't think they did. And that's the most fascinating angle of all this to me, because so I'm going to back up real quick. When I went to college, I studied mass communications and journalism. And so that aspect of this, like not even having anything to do with football, just the mining of information and then disseminating that information is super interesting to me, because what we're hearing from Lynch and Shanahan is that they didn't tell anybody. And if they didn't tell anybody in the building, who were Schefter and Rappaport and King and all these people talking to? Well, we know that those guys, like, all they have is their reputation. That's it. So they're not talking to random scout A and just immediately blurting out what random scout A told them. So they talk to somebody in the organization with enough clout, or multiple people within the organization with enough clout to confidently say, I think it's Mac Jones. And it's worth noting that the report was never, the 49ers are taking Mac Jones, the draft starts at 4. In fact, Ian Rappaport on the Rich Eisen show a few weeks before the draft said, I'm not ready to start the draft at 4. I think it's going to be Mac Jones, but I don't know. So my theory on what happened is when the 49ers were sitting at 12, they were poking around. They called the Panthers to find out what they were doing at 8. They called the Jets to find out what they were doing with Sam Darnold. They put all these feelers out. And I'm guessing in those conversations, Mac Jones' name continually came up because Mac Jones was the guy that they were going to target at 12. And Kyle Shanahan said on, I think it was Rich Eisen yesterday, oddly enough, he said that they called up about 6, they called up about 5. And I'm guessing that when that was the case, they were like, Mac Jones' name was the one that kept getting floated because he was just the guy that Shanahan had first kind of studied and fallen in love with. And then once he got onto Trey Lance, it became more clear that maybe number 6 wasn't going to get there, which is why they went up as high as 3. That's my guess. And once they made that trade, they clammed up and they didn't tell anybody anything. So I think Mac Jones' name was the first one that came out when they were at 12, and nobody heard anything differently, because I know, talking to people who talk to people inside the building, that I think there were like people in the building that thought it was Jones too. So I truly think that up until whatever it was, the week before the draft, or whatever the timeline was that they told people in the building, I truly think that it was Lynch and Shanahan were the only people who knew. And then they said the coaches and the scouting staff found out when we all did. So I don't know where the Mac Jones thing came from, but that's my theory that I'm sticking to, is that it was his name early and then nobody ever heard different. So that's just what they rolled with.
I mean, it fits the timeline. Kyle Shanahan said, he started off with Mac Jones, like you said, when he was in his vacation house in Mexico. What a life. But
so cool.
yeah, I just think that it was so interesting. And he even said it. Yeah, I think both of them agreed after the first round. They had that press conference. It was crazy to just see this narrative snowball into basically everybody believing they knew what the 49ers were going to do.
Yeah.
And you saw the odds with Vegas. They were influenced by that. They also went that way. So it was really interesting to see. I'm glad it didn't go that way. And I think on Rich Eisen, just like you brought up, I think Kyle said basically, if we stood pat at 12, we were probably going to take Mac Jones. Mm-hmm. So I think everybody's opinion was, and also just to add to that, that's kind of why everybody freaked out when Kyle said, if you were comfortable taking him at 12, you should be comfortable taking him at 3. Everybody's like, oh my God, it's Mac Jones. Yeah. It's Mac Jones. We're going to take him at 12. Oh man, crisis averted. It could have been ugly.
It would have been rough for sure. Trying to sift through the justification of that would have been a nightmare. It would have been a mess.
Yeah. And then you have guys like Michael Lombardi saying, no, he was the pick, but the fan outrage changed it.
You honestly, like, no chance. Do you know, like, have you ever paid attention to Kyle Shanahan ever? He's not a guy who's going to sit there and go, oh, well, fans said it. And just watch his body language and the way he talks to Trey Lance and talks about Trey Lance. This isn't a guy that he got dragged kicking and screaming to pick. Like, watch any Kyle Shanahan press conference from 2017, or interview in general from 2017 through now. He's not the type of guy who's good at hiding his emotions or masking what he's thinking. If he didn't want Trey Lance, we would probably be able to decipher from his body language, his tone, all these nonverbal things that, oh man, I don't think he wants him. But it was pretty clear to me in that little video the 49ers posted where it's Shanahan talking to Lance on the phone right after they drafted him. It was pretty clear that he was the guy. Yeah. And I can't fathom that they were sitting there going, yeah, Mac Jones is the pick. And then they went, oh, hey, all these tweets. It's just not. Yeah, because he's a confident guy. If they thought they were going to win multiple Super Bowls with Mac Jones and they had taken him and won multiple Super Bowls, nobody would have cared. No. And I think that was going to be their thought process. But I think when they moved up to 3, they knew that Lance was going to be the guy unless something happened to get them off of him.
Yeah, I agree. And just to add to this real quick, if that was the case that Michael Lombardi's reporting, that the fans basically influenced them off of Mac Jones, mm-hmm. You probably don't deserve to be a head coach and a GM in the NFL if you're going off of tweets. So, yeah, I'm glad that likely wasn't the case. Yeah. Kyle, we're going to move to some rapid fire questions. You can answer these with as little or as many words you like.
I talk a lot, so buckle up.
Okay, I'm in for the ride. First one, Kyle Shanahan famously couldn't guarantee anybody living past this past Saturday. Who's a surprise player, that you wouldn't guarantee being on the roster come week 1?
A surprise player not being on the roster come week 1. Oh, man. That's a good question. So luckily I just looked at the roster. And I don't think there's any crazy like they're not. If I had to pick one, just like a Raheem Mostert. I think that's one where, but I don't like. I'm just picking one because you asked. I don't think Raheem Mostert. I don't want it to come out like I think that's going to happen. I think Raheem Mostert is going to be on the roster and start. But if Eli Mitchell is just Raheem Mostert 2.0, and Trey Sermon's going to be awesome, and Jeff Wilson Jr. looks like he's going to pick up where he left off, and they want to part ways with Mostert. I mean, I guess, but they're not super deep. And when I was rolling through the roster, just like literally it was what I was doing right before I clicked on here. There's not a lot of guys that are super difficult to leave off. It's like the Kevin Givens versus Zach Kerr for a defensive tackle spot. And that's not necessarily, a crazy surprise. So I don't know if Marcel Harris makes the roster, if anybody that moves anybody, but yeah, I don't think there's anything that's like, earth shattering that's going to happen, barring something weird happening in camp or somebody being unavailable.
Right. No, I hear you. Which is interesting because this is kind of widely regarded as a Super Bowl roster still. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of all of it's mainly filled with a bunch of kind of lower level guys. Just speaks to coaching, I think.
Yeah. And they brought back a bunch of their own free agents too. That's kind of the other thing is there's not a lot of new faces. So I think if they're healthy, you are looking at a Super Bowl roster. I think they have better depth on the offensive line, but they have to start cycling through cornerbacks again like they did last year. They're going to be in some trouble.
Yeah, most definitely. Next question. Who starts more games in 2021, regardless of if it's because of injury or not playing well? Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance? And I'll preface this by saying I saw in your recent piece with the Niners Wire that you gave Trey Lance an 8% chance of starting. So definitely wouldn't happen at the beginning of the season if he does start more games. Who would you give more games to?
All right. So I have my mind easily changed on some stuff. And I was fully on board with the Niners idea of just starting Jimmy Garoppolo and if he plays 17 games then fine. But then I started thinking about it, and if Garoppolo plays all 17 games and Trey Lance doesn't start until week 1 of 2022, he's going to have gone like 2 full years between live actual games. Like he'll play in the preseason or whatever, but a game that matters. And that's not something I think they want. Chris Biederman, my co-host at Candlestick Chronicles, is leaning toward, he said on our last episode, he's developing the take that Lance is going to start week 1. And if Lance outplays Garoppolo, they're not going to just say, well, he's a rookie, so he can't start. If he's the better player and they think they have a better chance of winning with him, he's going to start week 1, which wouldn't shock me. But I put that 8% because I do think there's going to be a learning curve and there's going to be an adjustment period with just kind of the speed of the game and the fact that he hasn't played in a game in a year. But I think Lance winds up starting more games this year, but I think Garoppolo starts this season.
All right. I love it. Next question. Fill in the blank. Jed's tweets on draft night made me feel
like they were drafting Trey Lance.
Oh, really?
Or Justin Fields, if you wanted to buy the idea that they were keeping his name out of it so the Jets wouldn't take him, which was a internet theory. But yeah, Jed has a good idea of what the fan base is thinking. And I don't think he would have put himself out there like that if he knew that they were going to make such an unpopular choice as Mac Jones would have been. So when he started firing off all those tweets, it was like, all right, they're either trading for Aaron Rodgers and they're hammering out details, or they're drafting Trey Lance. Those were I didn't really have Mac Jones in my head once that started. So it was hilarious. A team CEO getting drunk or whatever he was and ripping off tweets like me at 19 years old, I thought was I think it's funny. It was great. I think you should tweet more like that.
Yeah, it was funny. And I thought myself, this is either the route that you laid out, that he's really excited, they know they're getting their guy, or he just realized, oh crap, something really bad is about to happen, and I'm like having a mental breakdown. But luckily it wasn't that.
That would have been wild.
Yeah.
Mental break of Jed.
Next question. Nick Bosa, Trent Williams, Buff Joe Staley. I don't know if you've seen his recent pictures.
I have.
Yeah. Or Javon Kinlaw. You have to pick one of them to fight the rest of them. To team up with you, team up with yourself to fight the rest.
Well, that's basically like fighting by themselves because I'm getting my ass whooped post-haste. Okay, so I have to pick one. So it's Buff Joe Staley. What were the other ones?
Nick Bosa, Trent Williams, and Javon Kinlaw.
All right, so... Oh, man. I think I'm going Trent Williams because he is the biggest and most athletic. So I think that's going to be the answer, but I wouldn't like any one of those guys' odds against the other group, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I wouldn't bet on him to win, but if I had to pick one.
It's a tough question. At least Trent Williams is used to protecting someone behind him, so
right, yeah,
maybe
I can hide out.
Yeah. Last question for you, Kyle. Do we potentially see a rebrand of Candlestick Chronicles as Levi's Legends, or does that sound a little too X-rated for you?
No. No. We started the podcast while they were at Levi Stadium. Candlestick is just kind of I know it means a lot to Chris, who grew up going to games there. It means a lot to me, who grew up going to games there. So I think it's just the stadium doesn't exist anymore. It's kind of sad driving around that side of the bay and it's just flat. It's a real bummer. So trying to keep Candlestick around as much as possible is kind of the goal. So I think we'll hang on to it for now.
All right. I love it. Kyle, thank you so much. I had a blast. Hopefully we can get you on again soon. Maybe when the season starts, talk some 49ers. Hopefully we're not as miserable this year.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime, man.
All right, guys, make sure you go and follow Kyle. His handle is on the screen below. Have a good one.